Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is the premiere broadcast of CityWorks, a collaboration of the City University of New York School of Labor and Urban Studies and CUNY TV. In every corner of this city, people work. Roads are built and repaired, sewers hooked up, goods are sold, the sick are cared for, and all of that is done by people. New jobs evolve every day in web design, overnight freight, even in the grocery store, and delivering books same day to your door. People work days and nights in the city that never sleeps. It all gets done only because people work hard. CityWorks honors that work and the people who do it right here in New York. This show is also about the challenges that working people face on the job and in their communities. We'll be looking at the issues, trends, policies, practices, and controversies that affect everyday New Yorkers. To get us started, let's talk about that controversial word, gig. It sounds hip and new, but gigs are still jobs, it turns out. And the gig economy has some of the same opportunities and challenges as exist in every other kind. For the record, the gig economy goes by many names. The sharing economy, the on-demand, peer, or platform economy. A so-called gig worker is someone who's employed in a freelance capacity, not on anyone's payroll, not as a company's part-time employee. That brings flexibility. Workers can go job to job, but they don't enjoy a lot of security. Whatever your opinion, the gig economy is booming. Here's reporter Demetria Irwin with our story.
My name is Andrew Campbell. I initially became an app driver when I still had, I guess you could say, a real job.
At 27, Andrew drives his car when an app lets him know he has a client.
A lot of the gig economy work that I do is mostly through Uber. A lot of people do both Uber and Lyft, like 90% of drivers do both.
Andrew has joined the legion of workers in the gig economy. A study from the Freelancers Union says that 1 in 3 New York City residents makes money from gigs, contributing more than $30 billion annually to the city's economy.
I really enjoy the freedom of it. I can decide for myself, like tonight, I'll probably drive really late because it's a Friday night and people are going to be out late, and there's a lot of flexibility involved.
Companies enjoy the freedom too. Freedom from the cost of a workforce with payroll taxes and benefits. Startups have counted on the streamline that is a gig workforce to get up and going. According to the former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, corporations save 30% on a gig worker. How's Andrew come to see it?
Income stability versus instability in this gig economy it's mostly unstable. Like, I don't like to think about, okay, what if I got the flu for 3 weeks?
One thing's for certain. Drivers like Andrew have come to respect the hard work that traditional cab drivers put in each day.
And I was absolutely terrified the first time I ever drove into Manhattan or even into the Bronx. I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? This is crazy. Like, there's so much traffic, it's overwhelming.
My name is Morgan Fears, and I walk dogs with Barkley Pets, which is an app, so I'm an app dog walker.
Another New Yorker whose work assignments arrive via an app on an iPhone. Morgan is thankful.
If it really wasn't for dog walking, I don't think I would have paid my first month's rent, to be honest. I have another part-time job now, but I do both. Since I do acting and I'm still in school part-time, it's just like really flexible.
What you hear more than anything is that the gig supports a holding pattern, money to get by, a life in development.
I want to be an actor, and my ultimate goal would be to write a movie and also star in it.
Alexis Flakes, native of Michigan and Howard University graduate, has called New York home for 10 years. As with many gig workers, she juggles multiple jobs.
I'm a digital video producer, editor, and host, and that takes most of my time right now. But I also am a yoga teacher, and I design and handcraft earrings, so lots going on.
That's right, video editing, jewelry design, and yoga instruction, all made possible in a digital universe where gigs are scheduled and compensation paid online. And gig workers are beholden to online ratings as well. But the hardest thing? Explaining it to parents.
I think there was a lot of confusion. Every Sunday when we talk, it's like, why don't you have a real job yet, right? I still kind of get those side eyes.
Meanwhile, a real job is sounding better and better these days to Andrew.
I had a full-time position before I was doing exclusively gig work, and I do definitely want to get back to having a full-time gig, like a real thing, commute 9 to 5 and file for sick leave and all that, because that is a better option than gig work.
Alexis has something else on her mind. She sees a secure job with benefits in stark contrast to, well, her dreams.
I think it's important to really take time to dream and think about what makes you happy, think about what makes you come alive inside, and spend time and dedicate energies and efforts in that direction and see what the universe will do and how it'll conspire to make your dreams realities.
Gig workers have to make it work, day by day and even hour by hour. But is the gig economy sustainable? We'll see. For CityWorks, I'm Demetria Irwin.
Nail salons have proliferated in New York and today number in the thousands. That's made the price of manicures here on average cheaper than anywhere else in the country. But cheap prices often mean low wages, and until now, no union. Here's our story about a nail salon worker, Yanelia Ramirez.
Concentration, a steady hand, professional technique. It's nail-bitingly hard work. Such is the life of nail salon workers.
Walk through any New York City neighborhood and you're bound to find a nail salon. With a dozen workstations or more, that translates into a very large workforce.
Meet nail salon worker Yanelia Ramirez, 14 years on the job. She lives and works in the Bronx. Her employment helps support her 5 children. There are 3,000 nail salon workers in New York City. For them, the wages from these jobs are the difference between poverty and getting by. Just getting by.
Yo empecé ganando por día. Ganaba $40 el día. Trabajaba 10 horas solo en el trabajo y 2 horas de camino porque trabajaba lejos.
Filing, buffing, manicures, and pedicures. Mistakes can lead to injuries. And there's more.
Bueno, yo siento que los químicos con los que trabajamos. Porque al final del día te termina afectando. Por el olor, es demasiado fuerte. Ahora mismo a mí me está dando alergia el acrílico y tengo que seguir trabajando.
Luis Gomez is a union organizer at Workers United, an affiliate of the Service Employees International Union.
We're talking about an industry of 35,000 workers in New York State, workers that are primarily new immigrants into this country, Korean, Chinese, Nepali, workers from Mexico, Ecuador, from all over, plus the American workers. It's a workforce that's super diverse.
Thanks to Luis Gomez, other organizers, and community support, the story of the exploitation of nail salon workers began to surface.
We were hearing stories of wage theft of workers working over 10-hour shifts, earning anything from $30 to $40 to $60 in a day. And this was for the entire week. They were coming home with less than $300, $350. That was something that we thought was a major issue in the industry that we needed to address. We also heard of issues of the health and safety, right, where workers weren't being provided the proper health and safety equipment. They weren't being provided the proper training to know exactly what were the dangers of working in the industry. You have chemicals that are being talked about that are leading to cancer.
That cancer is tied to a so-called toxic trio, formaldehyde, toluene, and dibutylphthalate, repeat exposure to which can make you very sick. Formaldehyde has been linked to nasal and lung cancer. The other 2 have been tied to reproductive problems and are banned in Europe. Wage theft, chemical exposure, cancer. Against this backdrop, nail salon workers in the state began meeting and formed the New York Nail Salon Workers Association in 2016. Today, there are 800 members.
Muchas que no creen que podemos hacer un cambio, creen que no va a pasar nada, que se va a quedar todo
Despite intimidation and firings, the number of nail salon workers joining the association is growing. Here at a Know Your Rights session, workers are learning about health and safety on the job.
Me siento bien porque siento que tengo el apoyo para los problemas que pueda generar mi trabajo. Eso me ayuda a estar más relajada, saber que cuento con un equipo de personas que me pueden ayudar a solucionar algún tipo de problema que pueda tener en mi trabajo.
Trabajé 6 años en esta industria y puedo sentir en carne propia las injusticias y no solamente el abuso económico, pero también psicológico y físico que existe en esta industria. Queremos formalizar un sindicato porque es la única manera de hacer respetar los derechos de los trabajadores.
We're seeing a lot of different things happen individually in the different salons, but in reality, what it is that we need is industry-wide. We're talking about a workforce of primarily immigrant women, many of them single mothers. So for me personally, it's an issue of economic, racial justice.
Bueno, yo me siento alegre porque pienso que por hablar o por decir mi experiencia puedo cambiar la vida de muchas mujeres y que vean que no solo es hablar y que ya quedó en eso, sino que estamos haciendo la lucha para cambiar muchas cosas en la industria de los salones de uñas.
So, I don't have a manicure right this second, but sometimes I do. What can those of us who go in for manicures or pedicures do to help these mostly women workers?
Right, so I mean, you can tip, but no one really wants to rely on tips. What these workers want is a livable wage, and that's really the goal here.
So tip well and work even harder for living wages for salon workers.
Absolutely.
Rights and justice. Thanks for your report. Toward the end of the last century, American commentators warned that the two defining players in the American economy were going to have a hard time adapting to the new century: big business and big labor. You only have to look at the stagnation of workers' wages to see that one seems to have adapted more quickly to new conditions than the other. Can unions catch up? Can labor? Can workers? Longtime New York Times reporter Stephen Greenhouse traces the ups and downs in a new book. It's called Beaten Down, Worked Up: The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. It's just out from Knopf Books. Here to talk about it is Stephen himself. Welcome back. Glad to have you in the studio.
Nice to be here, Laura.
Ups and downs. Are we on an up or a down?
Well, generally we've been on a down, but last year with all these teacher strikes and a hotel strike and the big Stop and Shop strike in New England, things are looking somewhat up. But more broadly, as I point out in the book, is that things are pretty bad for unions and workers in the United States.
Now, it's supposed to be that the more we produce, the more hours we put in, the more wages go up, but that hasn't been happening. It's supposed to be that when we get more technology, we get more leisure, but that's not been happening. So what has been happening? What has been holding labor back?
So one of the main points I make in the book is that worker power in the United States is at its lowest level, certainly since World War II. Unions and worker power in the United States is lower than in most other advanced industrial nations, and corporations are really able to push around workers. Workers and unions, unions just represent 6.4% of the workers in the private sector, 1 in 16. That's down from 1 in 3 at its peak. So when unions are so much smaller and so much weaker, it's hard for them to demand the wage increases. We're seeing record profits for business. Wall Street keeps hitting records, yet workers can hardly get raises that are faster than inflation. And one of the big points I make in the book is that something needs to be done to reverse this decline in worker power, because unless we do something about that, income inequality will be worse. We'll see more wage stagnation, and corporations and the 1% will continue to have truly undue sway over our politics and policy making. There's a lot of talk about American exceptionalism, but there's far too little talk about America's anti-worker exceptionalism. The U.S. is the only industrialized country that doesn't have paid maternity leave. Only Suriname and Papua New Guinea and a few Pacific Island states are the only other countries in the world that don't have paid maternity leave. The United States is the only industrialized country that doesn't have universal health coverage. So we're the only country where if you lose your job, you lose your health coverage.
You also make the point that there is no other industrial country that fights as hard as corporate America does against union power and union formation. And yet we are seeing extraordinary strides in in surprising places. When you talk about the future, where do you see the seeds of optimism?
So the teacher strikes, I think, were a great example where when you kick around workers
West Virginia,
badly
LA,
enough, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona, I write about them in detail in my book, and I have some about the LA teacher strike as well. If you kick them around badly enough, they're going to say, we ain't going to take it anymore, and they, these tremendous strikes with 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 teachers, and they won their strikes, and I think that really opened the, and those strikes, more than any strikes in a decade or two, got a ton of media attention. I think they opened up a lot of people's eyes about what unions can achieve, and I think they made people more sympathetic to unions. And I mentioned this big hotel strike against Marriott at the end of last year by Unite Here, which is one of the most effective unions representing hotel workers. They made major gains, winning 20, 30% raises. The Stop and Shop strike in New England, that also made surprising gains. People tell me there was huge public solidarity for those supermarket, grocery strikers. So something is going on, but that doesn't mean management continues to fight very, very, very hard against unions.
You had a number of almost 5,000 strikes in the year 1946, and maybe some of them failed. But the momentum and the just mass of action affected the climate. Is the climate shifting today, do you think?
So in 1946, there were a wage freeze during World War II. Workers were very pissed off by the end of the war, and there were massive strikes to get wage increases. Now, what we saw with the teachers, what we saw with the hotel workers, what we saw with the grocery workers, now we might see a strike by 60,000 grocery workers in Southern California. There is a growing militancy, but it doesn't begin to be like 1946, and wages are finally picking up a little. If the economy falls into the toilet again in the next year or two, I think workers are going to be pretty upset that they did not get their fair share of the gains in the longest expansion, 10-year expansion in American history.
I think they're pretty upset even before we fall into the toilet.
Yes.
As an economy. Stephen, thank you so much.
My
It's
pleasure.
really a pleasure having you. The book is Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. Find it at your local independent bookseller now.
The CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies is the 25th and newest school under the CUNY umbrella. Dedicated to public service and social justice, the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies offers undergraduate and graduate degrees in the areas of labor studies and urban studies, and certificate programs in labor relations, public administration and public policy, healthcare policy and administration, and community leadership. We pride ourselves on being an institution that brings together activists and academics. Find out more at slu.cuny.edu.
CityWorks, this program celebrates the working people of New York, like, your local blacksmith. Don't have a blacksmith on your block? Think it's just a relic? Not at all. Just ask Larry Hagberg.
Well, the tradition of blacksmithing, is 3,000 years old. Every tool that any tradesman ever used to ply their trade had to be made by a blacksmith. This forge and this anvil and this hammer can produce items that would take $200,000 worth of machinery to do. When you're a blacksmith and you drive around the city, you can see all the architecture and all the ironwork from the people that come before you. And I can relate to it. I could tell. I could look at something. I could see if it was hand forged or if it was made by a machine. You could tell. You're looking at all the big buildings. There's blacksmith work in every one of them. As a New York City blacksmith, all the blacksmiths in New York City belong to Local 5, boilermakers, blacksmiths, iron shipbuilders, forgers, and helpers. The good thing about the union is the experience that the men have. Like all the blacksmiths that I worked with, 4th, 5th generation blacksmiths, the real deal. And you can't get that knowledge base anywhere else except from people who have been in it. And usually the union guys are in it. I was a kid, I used to go to upstate to a dude ranch. And I became friends with the blacksmith who used to shoe the horses. And I said, that looks like fun. Shoeing horses was not fun. I did it for 15 years because I had to. Then I had an opportunity to work for the Parks Department. Best opportunity in my life. I'm glad I took it. And I've been learning ever since. We have a lot of dog runs in the city now. So the dog urine plays havoc with the grills and the gratings. So now I take a piece of stainless steel. This is an old window guard. Like I said, we don't throw anything away. I have the rest of it over here. We had see that? We even cut a big one out. I remember this. This big one, I think, went to Washington Square Park dog run. So make 2 of those. Grind it down smooth. It's pretty smooth. Dogs won't hurt their feet. One of the blacksmiths told me a long time ago, the fire, if you're friends with the fire, it will never burn you. He lied. The fire has no friends, it'll burn everybody. But when you put a piece of steel in the fire, it becomes soft. You try to do this when the steel is cold off the rack. Forget about it, you can't do that. So the steel makes it plastic, so you can move it like putty. The hammer moves it in the direction you want it to move in. If I told you I was going to make a key and I had a piece of flat stock, you couldn't see the key inside of it. I can see the key. The hammer knows the way to the key. Every hit means something. When you see, and I'm going like this, you're focusing on the piece. When you're looking at the steel, you're thinking about where your next blow is going to land. And then it goes over, you land the blow, move it over, and you keep your rhythm. I don't know who said it, but years ago they said a man who does what he loves to do for a living never has to work a day in his life. I've been here 26 years. I don't feel like I've been working, slaving away for 26 years, even though it's hard, hot, and grueling work. I love every beat of the hammer.
And we love people like Larry Hagberg, whose behind-the-scenes work is an integral part of the city's infrastructure. Other people's work is more apparent, like the musicians who perform on the streets and the subways and on the subway platforms. They're amongst the city's hardest workers, and they don't expect much. Maybe some of your attention, ideally a few dollars. Some manage to make an impact, even a small living. CityWorks caught up with the Robert Anderson Jazz Band on the job in the subway underneath Grand Central.
I've been doing this for 30 some odd years, where I made it from the subway. I became very famous from the subway. I became a famous bass player for R&B group for the song, and we travel all over the world. My name is Robert Anderson, and I perform in the subway because it's a place where there's an outlet to children, old people, young people. Everybody gets a chance to hear you in the subway. There's no discrimination against the music in the subway. So that's why I really play out here, mainly for the children, though.
My name is Brian McKenzie. I'm a trumpet player, and one of my favorite stations to play at is Rockefeller Center. We have a really appreciative crowd there, and it's a nice station to play in. It can be unbearable at that station in the summer months, but during the winter months, it's a joy to play there because it's heated.
This is a hustle out here. You don't tell people what I'm play some music for you, give me some money. No, you don't do that. You come out here and you give with your heart. And if you give with your heart, it'll go to the heart.
I just always love it when people give their time to show their creativity and express their music, and it gives noticeably everyone a smile when they're walking by. It lifts them for that brief minute that they're walking by, and I think it's very generous and kind, and the least I can do is give something back to them and listen and take the time to notice that they're bothering.
Making a living as a musician is a hard thing to do because the climate has changed in New York a lot. 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you had clubs in New York where you can go and make a pretty half-decent living then. 50 years ago was better. 60 years ago was even better. The pluses for playing in the subway is the people. You reach everybody,
We hope you've enjoyed our first program. We're aiming high. In a media environment that doesn't pay much attention to workers, we want to pay a lot of attention to the people and the reality of our working lives. Got a story? Got a question? Be in touch. You can hit us up via email at cityworks@slu.cuny.edu. I'm Laura Flanders. Thanks for watching.